Hello and welcome to this live chat session. Can you hear me? Thank you, Ethiopia. Let me RBK Mulugata Shimalis Mihari Vendor Right Fisha Fesha Asable Belacho Macbebe Ghost Sam Muhammad Jabir Siraj Peace for All Abdi Tahir, Tayyib Hussain, Open Mind, Alistair Yemane, Burji Suyama, Bisrat Tivalde, Daniel Musisa, Gabrish Gabru, Tigray Truth, Brakasa Gole, Hale Adabe, Sam Muhammad, YouTube, Mikias, Jacob Jericho, Mahdar Reda 3 and 3 70 peaceful Zakaria Abdullahi. Zakaria stays in touch with me. Zakaria corrects my pronunciation as well. Thank you, Zakaria. I remember he educated me about how to pronounce cho sound, gatacho, and this sound in Ethiopian local languages. Kase Aregawi, Abdullahi Abdi, FNOT TV, F Work Bare. Thank you for joining, viewers. Thank you for joining. Uh, Someone asked a question, who assigned you? No one assigned me. That's my choice to cover conflicts. Do you watch my other channel as well? Conflict News 24. I share links on this channel's comment section, on this channel's community section. So you would see that Tigray conflict isn't the only conflict which I am covering. I have covered lots of conflicts, so it is one of the conflicts which I have covered, which I am covering. On Conflict News 24, I am covering Russia, Ukraine, conflict, Taiwan, China, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Israel, Palestine, Turkey, Greece, and all other conflicts. Omar Saleh, Nijat Tahir, Nabe Asifane, Waktole Ticker, Peace for All. Thank you, Peace for All. Why cover conflicts YouTube? Mikyas asked. Well, I like covering conflicts. It's a challenge to cover a conflict because you need to understand the conflict. It's a new thing for you. So how to understand the background, how to get the feel of what is happening, how to get in the groove to be able to say something. It takes time, it takes research, it takes hard work. I like doing it. And the purpose is to brief the people, to inform the people about conflict in an unbiased manner. And it's a learning for me as well. Conflict learning, conflict is a learning for whoever studies it. News from South Africa, Shinafi Zaleke says, news from South Africa is not very encouraging. You know what I have reported in previous videos, that African Union proved to be, I won't use harsh words, but very disappointing organization. I mean, can you imagine a mediation where parties to the conflict have not been informed about the venue of talks and date of talks, about mediators as well, and one of the mediators was not consulted as well? Does it happen anywhere in the world, in any conflict? I mean, in regional, local, even conflict between two groups in a small village cannot be resolved if mediators decide date and time of mediation on their own without consulting the parties. So, African Union is very disappointing so far. Why African Union lost trust by international community? You know what is happening. There are some basic rules to mediation. You cannot force mediation on people. You always keep parties on board. That is how you build trust. Mediators must ensure their impartiality. But African Union has failed to maintain impartiality. Halle says, do you think Tigray will be independent country? We have talked about this question. We have answered this question several times in the past. In present circumstances, Tigray is not in a position to declare independence. Tigray will only consider declaration of independence once it has a corridor with some neighboring country. Otherwise, Tigray in its present situation is not feasible as an independent country. So this planning of independence could be there within TPLF circles, but no signs, no likelihood of its announcement until TDF takes over Volkite, if it could. Mehari says, former Kenyan president cancelled the talks in South Africa because the authorities talked to him out of it. Yeah, he was not consulted. Kenyatta was not consulted about the schedule. When will talks be held? He was not consulted. And secondly, he questioned the agenda. Cessation of hostilities never mentioned by African Union in its statements. African Union said negotiated ceasefire. It means that it wanted talks to go on for some time and fighting go on as well. Tigray has been demanding immediate stopping of war. And that is what seems to be the point of view of Kenyatta. And thirdly, Kenyatta wants involvement of other players as well, international players. Reportedly, he is in alignment with the US, EU, UN. And some accuse him of being their man of Western countries, Western powers. But he's on good terms with them. So he wants their involvement too in these talks. Bukura said, do you think OLA can capture Addis? Again, a question we have answered several times in the past. OLA's stated goal is Addis Ababa, but OLA is not an army. Active says, hello Sajid, greetings from Tigray. Hello, Active. OLA's stated goal is Finfine, Addis Ababa. But OLA is not an army. OLA has no tanks, no artillery pieces, no MLRS. It has just small weapons, not heavy weapons, light weapons. So it's not in a position to capture or to remain in control of Addis Ababa. Capturing is something else. Capturing is one aspect, and to remain in control of a city, to govern it, is another thing. OLA does not have that sort of capability to rule Ethiopia. It does not have any experience as well of running governments, though it is running some governments at local level. But it has no experience of being part of people ruling Ethiopia. So OLA will have to turn itself into an army if it wants to capture Addis Ababa. Though their style of insurgency suits them, because you saw that ENDF launched an operation against OLA, Oromia forces. But since they are sort of light infantry with no heavy weapons, so it was easy for them to relocate themselves, to withdraw towards safe places. But to capture Addis Ababa, they'll have to evolve into an army, to acquire weapons as well. They'll have to acquire weapons, long range weapons, heavy weapons. And so far, OLA is not in a position to be a serious threat to Addis Ababa, I think. Do you believe Eritrean military is making a difference on Syria front? I have been saying that Eritrean military is the difference between Tigray forces and Ethiopian National Defense Force. If you put Eritrean military out of this conflict, you will see that in days Tigray forces will advance. They'll push ENDF. Mainly offensives from Eritrea are being commanded by Eritrean generals. Eritrea is Eritrea is the main architect of this war. Eritrean military makes a huge difference. Not a small difference, a huge difference. See, a far front totally commanded by Eritreans. Almost no ENDF on a far front. Shiraro Shire, both ENDF, EDF. Now Zilambasa, Rama, Sirona, EDF. So main fronts which are hurting Tigray are being led by Eritreans. So it means that Eritrean military is the difference between Tigray forces and ENDF. Do you think ENDF without air power could defeat TDF? It's difficult. Two main edges which Tigray's rivals have are air power and Eritrean military. Tigray is on its own. It has no air power. It has no unlimited supply of weapons. But Tigray has morale because it is fighting to defend its territories. There is conviction among Tigrayans that if they lose, they'll be wiped out. So they believe they're fighting for survival. That is why they'll keep on fighting. My position is that Tigray fighters will keep on fighting for months, for years. Leadership as well, TDF, TPLF leadership, because they know that if they are caught, if they are arrested, they'll be killed, they'll be in prison for their entire lives. So they have no option. That's their conviction, that they have no option but to fight. So this is the edge which Tigray Defense Force has. And ENDF does not have this sort of morale. That is why you see that mostly ENDF soldiers are taken prisoner by Tigray forces. Why? Because ENDF does not have this sort of conviction that they are fighting for their survival. Who will be the dominating country in the Horn of Africa after this war? That depends upon the outcome of this war. Overall, Ethiopia has been weakened because Ethiopia was one of major powers in East Africa before the start of this war. Ethiopia, Ethiopian economy, Ethiopian military, Ethiopian society, Ethiopian society's harmony have been destroyed. Country has been considerably weakened. no matter how much wheat Ethiopia is going to produce this year. As a country, Ethiopia has lost uh, its position of influence in the region. Eritrea is emerging as a key player. You see that Hassan Sheikh, whose thousands of soldiers are in Eritrea under training, and he was very critical of Isaias Afwerki. Even he was forced to visit Eritrea. And he was all praise for Eritrean ruler, President Isaias Afwerki. Eritrea is emerging as a key player in the Horn of Africa. Djibouti, despite having more resources, though small in comparison to Eritrea, cannot challenge Eritrea, I think. Ethiopia, dependent on Eritrea. Sudan, fighting internal crises. So, and Somalia as well, fighting Al-Shabaab. So it's mainly Eritrea which is stable and which will become stronger after this war, if the war did not hurt Eritrea. Metkel says, I can see that you are in favor of Eritrea. No, I'm not in favor of anyone. But analysis should be neutral. We don't back the way Eritrea is being ruled by, we don't support, we don't agree with the governance model adopted by Isaias Afwerki. But when it comes to analyzing things, I do it objectively without any bias towards any side. Why do you think is fighting a just war for a just cause? No war is a just war. No war is a just war. A war is basically a failure of diplomacy. War is basically a failure of politicians. Politicians fail, wars start. Diplomats fail, wars start. Responsibility of this war is not on Ethiopians, on Eritreans. Responsibility is on Ethiopian government leaders and Tigray leaders. Political leadership failed, war broke out. And still the leadership has not learned from its mistakes. Still the war is continuing. So we cannot say that war is basically a failure. We should not see it as for a just cause. We shouldn't promote it, I think. Who will be brought to ICC for justice, to face justice? It depends on the global powers. What do they want? Groundwork is being prepared. This UN investigation, which is being conducted. And you know that UN Inquiry Commission's mandate has been renewed for a year again. And in its previous report, UN Inquiry Commission accused Ethiopian federal government of using hunger as a weapon of war. So one day this report could be used against Ethiopian government at some level, on some forum. It could happen. That depends upon relations between Ethiopian government and global powers, which matter, especially the US and the EU. What is new on Shire front? Biruk says, Shire front, TDF has lost ground here. I have been reporting. I reported about Adi Hagre, Adi Ovala, and other places. Tigray forces have lost ground. Paulos joined as well. Very critical of my reports. And on this front, TDF has lost some ground. No doubt about that. That is why Shire is being shelled, because Shire is within the hitting range of conservative artillery, traditional orthodox artillery pieces of Eritrean and Ethiopian governments. Because EDF and ENDF are close to Shire, not a few kilometers away from Shire. I think around 20 to 30 kilometers away from Shire they are. TDF is fighting back, so we cannot say what going to be the outcome of this offensive on Shire. TDF is fighting on all fronts, and this time it is becoming difficult for ENDF and EDF to take control of major cities in Tigray. Compare it with November 2020. In just 23 days, back then, ENDF, EDF had captured Mekelle. This time, TDF is sacrificing. People of Tigray are sacrificing. Back then, when in November 2020, when drones started drone strikes, it was a surprise. It was a new thing for Tigray forces. Before that, Tigray forces had not faced drone strikes. So they could not handle air strikes, drone strikes, and TDF decided to withdraw from all cities. This time, TDF is holding its ground, even in cities. It has not decided to retreat from cities. Tigray cities, it left Wollo. But despite drone strikes, air strikes, and more, modern drones are being used by Ethiopian government forces this time. TB2s, I think there were no TB2s in November 2020. Back then, there were just Winglongs. Winglong 1 Chinese drones of UAE were used for strikes against Tigray forces. Now, both TB2s and Winglongs in operation, still Tigray holding its ground, holding its positions. By the way, viewers, battlefield situation keeps on changing. A town comes under TDF, and 2 or 3 days after that, TDF is out of it. It happens. So it's difficult to predict the final outcome of this war. What we are reporting about the control of a town today could be different tomorrow. How many POWs in Mekelle? In Mekelle, there will be around 20,000, I think, because there were around 10,000 before the start of this war, and 10,000 more claimed by Tigray. So it means that around 20,000. What is your IQ? I don't know. I don't know. Have you seen war like this in history TDF is facing now? African wars are like what we are seeing in Tigray. So it's not unique. Even worst wars were seen in Africa in the past. That is how African wars are. Though this time international community is involved, Tigray in a way involved international community in this war. Otherwise, in some African countries, conflicts are ongoing, thousands are dying, and no one cares. But in this war, at least international community is involved, EU, US as well. But international community has some limitations. What happened in Myanmar? A coup. Entire international community opposed it. China supported it. And you saw what happened, that Aung San Suu Kyi was removed. Elected leader of the country. And still military in power. So international community has its limitations because it splits, it protects its own interests. A viewer sent a question to me. He said, Sajid, you always say that Tigray and Tigray regional government, Ethiopian federal government, they should make some compromises. So when you say that Tigray should make a compromise, what do you mean? I think I made myself clear in some previous videos as well. Main sticking point between which is a hindrance to the resolution of this conflict is Volkayet. Volkayet Humera Sakade. Both Tigray and Amhara have very strong positions about this area. Both sides will have to make some sort of compromise. Otherwise, no matter what happens, this war will not come to an end. They'll keep on fighting. I don't back suspension of basic services in Tigray. People of Tigray have a right to have electricity, to have banking. And by the way, by suspension of basic services in Tigray, people of Tigray are suffering, people of Afar as well. Zone 2 of Afar was connected with Tigray. So while Tigray is under a blockade, we must not forget the suffering of Afar people to the east of Tigray. There also banking service almost suspended, no aid arriving there. And now when fighting is ongoing, all supplies from Sardo to northern Afar have been suspended. So this suffering of Tigray is hurting other neighboring regions as well. Solution is flexibility by all sides. Ethiopian government this time is rigid than last year. Why? Because I think that now they can strike a decisive blow to Tigray Defense Force, Tigray forces, TPLF. Eritrea, its stated position is that TPLF should cease to exist. But they don't know that things can change swiftly. If Tigray somehow repels this first onslaught on its soil, you will see Tigray will bounce back. And then the other party might show some flexibility, which is not being shown now, I think. The topic of today's live chat is TDF's last weapon. What could be TDF's last weapon, or its new strategy which it could adopt in coming days? What's your take? Belacho says, do you think TDF made mistake by returning from Dabre from North Shore? If you have been following my videos back then, I questioned that strategy adopted by TDF. TDF made two decisions which were surprising. First one was in 2020, November, when suddenly after heavy drone strikes, it retreated from all major towns and cities. Second decision was in October 2021. Again, drone strikes, heavy drone strikes, TB2s and TDF suddenly decided to return all the way from Debre Birhan to Mekelle. This time, Tigray forces, at least to the extent of Tigray, they're not withdrawing. They have withdrawn, They have retreated from Wollo, but to the extent of Tigray, they are fighting for every inch of their territory. They could have done that last year as well, but they chose to retreat, and now they are. By the way, it's a little easy to fight on your home soil. In the previous, in last week's live chat session, we discussed that on your home soil you can defend from drone strikes by denying intelligence to your rivals from the ground. You cannot deny intelligence to your rivals from the ground if you are in neighboring regions. So while in Tigray, TDF is in a better position to defend from drone and air strikes. That is why it's fighting on its home soil, but it is fighting to defend even each and every inch of its territory. It's not withdrawing from Tigray's territories, like unlike it did in November 2020. So there is a review of military strategy by Tigray forces this time. TDF's last weapon or last move we were discussing. One viewer said TDF does not have any such weapon. A viewer said, Sajid, there is no evidence of Eritrean involvement in this war. If Eritrean soil is being used, what would you say? Would you say Eritrea is not involved? Russia attacked Ukraine in February from Russia and from Belarus. In Belarus, Russian forces were conducting some military drills, and from there they entered Ukraine. And from the east as well, from Belgorod, they entered Ukraine to Donbass. So Belarus was used, its soil was used by Russia to invade Ukraine. Can you say Belarus was not part of this war? No one would say that. Belarus is still under sanctions, like Russia is. Is Sudan involved? Someone is asking. Yes, Sudan is involved. For several months, I've been reporting that Tigray fighters were being trained, organized on Sudanese soil. Not just TDF, other armed groups as well. So Eritrea is involved, heavily involved. Eritrean generals are leading this war from northern front. TDF's weapon, someone said guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare they have done already, and yes, they'll have no option but to start a guerrilla warfare if they are pushed out of Tigray cities. I think we could see one of the two moves by TDF in coming days. Whether you call it last weapon or whether you call it a sign of desperation, but TDF might either it will make a move towards Volkayth or towards Eritrea. Move towards Eritrea could be suicidal. Move towards Volkayth could be suicidal, because since November 2020, Tigray forces have tried multiple times to take back Volkayth. They could not. But now they are so trapped, so under pressure, that if they are pushed further against the wall, you could see some major move from Tigray forces. Like they fired missiles on Eritrea in November 2020. That was just firing of missiles. I think this time either they'll target Volkite once again, whether they can take it or not, but they'll try one major attack on Volkite, or they'll push towards Eritrea. That is my understanding. I don't have any intelligence. By the way, I am in touch with no one from government side, from Ethiopian government, from Eritrean side, from Tigray. What I say is based on understanding of the situation, based on what I have been covering. And secondly, hundreds of you talk to me on daily basis. I learn from all sides, perspectives of all parties. I learn. That is how somehow it becomes easy for me to understand. Otherwise, there are people who are being fed by the government, by Tigray side as well. I know them. You know, they break news in advance. If I break news in advance, either it is because of some intelligence, some sources which we have developed over the years, over the past 24 months, or assessment, pure understanding of the situation. So my understanding is that Tigray will make a move in towards Volkite or towards Eritrea. Give peace a chance and surrender. Let innocent children and women live, Haley says. I told you that for them, surrender means death. Surrender means extermination. Why? Because there is atmosphere of hatred between Tigrayans, TPLF, and non-Tigrayans, ruling elite in Addis Ababa. They don't know what will happen if they surrender. And secondly, TPLF is not external force from Mars. It's part of Tigray. Tigrayans are part of TPLF. So surrender is no option. If Ethiopian government is hoping that Tigray, TPLF, TDF would surrender, this war will never come to a close. I think by now, Ethiopian government should understand, if it wants to understand, that TDF will not surrender. I personally think that Ethiopian government, Eritrean government, they are hoping to wipe out TPLF. They are not hoping that TPLF would surrender. They think that TPLF can be stuck. A heavy and decisive blow could be stuck against TPLF. Abiy should resign, Belacho says. Why would he? Someone is asking about channels, TDF channels and ENDF channels. Yes, TDF channels are fighting in very difficult circumstances. Their own lives are in danger, their movement being monitored, their residencies being bombarded, TPLF leadership as well. ENDF channels are not under this type of pressure. They are leading, yes, but they are not under drone strikes and air strikes. So despite this threat, TDF channels leading from the front. That is why I say that Tigray fighters, their generals, their morale is high. Getacheo's house stuck twice. It was a narrow escape for Getachew. Still, you see, has he surrendered? Will he surrender? No, he won't. I think people should learn that this war won't end in surrender of one or the other party. There must be some give and take at the table. Viewers, 41 minutes have passed. It was a great live chat session. Thank you for joining. I am planning to start a question and answer session. If it became doable, then we'll take your questions in audio, video format, and we'll do weekly or bi-weekly videos, and we'll take your comments as well in the form of audios, videos, and we'll air them. We're planning something like this. Thank you for joining. If you're interested in knowing about other global conflicts, you can watch the other news channel, the other YouTube channel, which I created around 2 months ago. That is Conflict News 24. Thank you for joining. See you in the next live chat session. And I try to be very careful when I speak. Don't want to hurt anyone. The purpose is not to hurt the people on all sides. There are sensitivities involved. People are dying. So if ever you feel that I am crossing limits in terms of hurting sensitivities, please let me know, because I feel for the people who are suffering. If we cannot play a constructive role in resolving this conflict, at least we should not hurt others. So I would request all of you as well, please don't be a medium of spreading hate and propaganda. Talk of peace, talk of negotiations, talk of peaceful solution to this conflict. Maybe people in power will learn someday that they have failed and they have turned Ethiopia into a battlefield, entire Ethiopia. Thanks for watching.